How have the exam boards responded with respect to reading? Here are the variables I've identified. Obviously length, although Ofqual now gives a minimum and a maximum of the number of words, within that exam boards could choose to have different number of texts, couldn't they? The reading total marks, are there more or fewer? What about the question types? They're all in English, but are they more multi-choice, match or open-ended? Distractors, how do they go? And is there more of a bias towards culture or the student? Here's an AQA reading foundation, and here I would classify this really as being one question, one answer. So there you've got Eglantine, a text. It's very clear that that's Eglantine. At the weekend I'm a waiter, and you've got to click on which one it is. And you can see, by the way, here, this is all the exam boards, I feel, are very aware of trying to make sure that diverse people are shown, although I would say that actually they're all female. Edexcel, the simplest one there is where you've got 3 people speaking. It's very clear who is saying what, but you've got to say who works in a shop, so you've got to look through all of those texts in order to work out which one is which. So it isn't a short text with a short answer. That you do have to have read all of that to get those answers. So my analysis for the whole paper is where I'm seeing how many multi-choices are there. So here, for example, and where it's highlighted, that makes it different from others. So where you've got a choice out of 3, there are 26 where it's a choice of 1 out of 3. Whereas in the Edexcel you've got 16. Open-ended in English there are 8, so that's the lowest number. Or Educas is the draft version where they've got 23 which are in English. There are no close exercises used there. And then this is where I just counted up how many chunks are there which are clearly linked to a single question, as opposed to chunks where you have a chunk and it's links to multiple questions. And there I found that it was absolutely equal for those two, for the AQA and for the Edexcel. Then organisation of difficulty, as in with the whole of the rest of the exams, peaks and troughs within study incline of difficulty for AQA, increasing difficulty for the other two. Cultural content, as before, AQA, everything is set as you're listening to, you're reading from French students, so giving it so that it's visiting Morocco, a town in Togo, and slavery. It's very clear that they are set in the target language country. There are more proper nouns which are mentioned in the reading. I think it's the listening where people can sometimes get particularly confused, can't they, if they hear a word in the listening. If they read it, it's sometimes that's actually the way that you ask the question, is what does this person say and what does that person say. So you have got to recognise these. And then for the Edexcel, again, more, there are some cultural ones, but it's more, tends to be generic. So it's just Maxime who's writing a diary. It's not particularly set in a French cultural situation. Whereas for a French, there it particularly said it was a French newspaper, so that's where I gave it cultural, and the internet forum there was very clearly a French one. And then, as with the AQA, not much difference there, the number of names, but remember that in Edexcel there'll always be the same names of people, and places will be, yes, and there are some places as well. I just noticed that there was a section on a French town, but it doesn't actually say which French town. So cultural content there, I've summarised what the situation is, and that's as the boards have intended to do it. For the higher level, I've done the same sort of analysis. So again, you've got 27 marks, which are where it's a multi-choice 1 out of 3, and open-ended English 10. The fewest number of questions in English. There are 18 for Edexcel, and 23 in the draft of the Educas. And these are the same as the others about peaks and troughs, increasingly difficult. An extra thing here, actually I should have done this on the foundation, I forgot, is the inference. So they do have, for the foundation and for the higher, they do have inference. For some reason, I had thought inference was only meant to be for the overlap and the higher. But I think that's where I've got a bit confused with that and using particular techniques to infer. So I will check on that. But I'm going to show you what they look like. So here then is the most difficult of the reading. I showed you the least difficult. This is the most difficult, and this is AQA. And it's similar, if you've watched my video on listening, it's a similar sort of thing where you're trying to make it that if it is multi-choice, there might be some sort of demand on it, more demand. But here you've got examples of open-ended questions. So why is Notre-Dame-la-Garde special for sailors? So, yes, you haven't got the word for sailor. It's these people who do jobs at sea. And this is what they're having to know. It brings luck. And in these days where you've got a finite number of words which people are expected to know, people would be expected to know those words. Apporter is in the vocabulary list, and chance is in the vocabulary list. And what's the best option for getting to Notre-Dame-de-la-Garde? This I think really is testing, do you know these words? By bus, it's far from being the worst option. And that, in the end, happens to be the best option. So it's testing that you know far from being, isn't it? Because if it were the worst option, then that would be incorrect. Because the others are real problems. At least I think that's the right answer. Next one. Write the letter of the correct option. Compared to Notre-Dame-de-la-Garde, the number visiting Museum is, and this is where you're being tested on, you know that it's as big as. So if you didn't know the aussi que, meaning as big as, you wouldn't get that. And you can visit the Château d'If. It says in all seasons, in winter as in summer. And there, actually, I should have highlighted that obviously there are distractors there because there's the word mardi, Tuesday, so it's not that. It's not été, which is summer, it is all year round. So the final question for Edexcel is this one, where you have a school project. Note that with Edexcel, they do make more authentic the look of the document. So you can see that is, it's meant to look like a magazine there. I've just taken the words here to show how this is. So these are questions open-ended in English, which can be really quite demanding, can't it? Because you've really got to produce the language. You can't sometimes work things out from a multi-choice. So name one thing the class worked on when visiting the mountain reserve. I think this is quite straightforward, isn't it? To work, you'd have on problems of environment and pollution. So they're very similar to English words. And if you just had one of those, you would get the mark. Why have so many fish died recently? They have unfortunately died. So there wasn't enough water in the lakes. And that's enough to say because there wasn't enough water. What made the animals ill? So you've got the word ill because they were eating plastic bags. And you would actually have to have eating. They were eating plastic bags. Name one thing tourists are asked not to do. So encourage tourists not to. And again, you've got two options. So like this one, they will accept that one or that one. So although you could see English as being a little bit open-ended questions being a bit more demanding, at least here they are making it so you've got some options there. And how can they share their ideas? You can send them by email to the president. I think that probably would be fairly straightforward, but it is something which is more demanding to have to produce the English. Cultural content, again, with the AQA, there are more C's than G's, in that, so it is particularly set as being, in France, and here on a new film, which is a French film, and you've got Marseille there. And you've got more cultural content in the reading here in Edexcel than some of the others. So Hugo is writing to a French friend there. And then you've got articles about beaches in Paris and the school magazine, which is to your Swiss friend. And I've done an analysis there of the reading high, so you can see many more obviously related to culture there on the AQA, but there still are quite a few in EdXL which are related to culture as well. Now on the inference, they've got to be able to infer meanings of single words from outside the vocabulary list. And I think this is where I've got a bit confused, because I've talked about the fact you have to be able to use certain strategies to work out meanings of words which have a stem in an existing word. Well, I don't think that definitely is the bit that has to be used for this inference question. That was my misunderstanding. So if I've said that before, here it is really just work out the meanings of words, not necessarily using those strategies. So here I've put 3 slides where you can see how this is dealt with by the exam boards, and it's really very similar. They've taken the same sort of approach here of making it absolutely clear which is the word you're looking for and where it is. So read the review. Where would you find this table de chevet? That's the word which they've not come across, but could you work it out from the context? So if you knew these words to sleep and dreaming, you should therefore probably work out that it's in a bedroom. Here, the French town, what have we got here? Which is the best translation for the word épicerie? Épicerie, of course, was the current specification. You'd think, well, they probably know that anyway. More so than perhaps table de chevet, I don't know. But what would be the ways they could work that out? Well, there's something about there isn't a supermarket, so it might be to do with shops, and then practical for doing your shopping. Although if you know that I was just thinking, if you know could be to do with running as well, that might be a distractor. I don't think so. I think they'd get that. Quite straightforward. Then for the overlap, here we've got this word which they won't have come across before probably, unless they've gone to Africa perhaps to see this or read about it. So they've got to work out what would you do with it? Would you clean it, eat it, wear it? Well, if you knew words like vegetables and having a drink with it, you'd probably work it out that it was to do with eating. And over here, the word avocat, which, well, perhaps they would, it's quite like an English word, isn't it? I don't know. But certainly you'd have to know there, or you might get it from struggling for equality and the word for the rights of children as being a lawyer. But there's a little bit of a distractor there, because you've got she studied it at university, so that could be a bit of a distractor. So although what I'm saying is, but even though I actually think that's probably a bit more straightforward, they have put a distractor there, I think. And for the higher level, what have they got to work out here? Le crépuscule, what does that mean? Well, there they've highlighted what the word is that they're looking for, and then when the sun goes to bed, when it goes down. So that's going to be in the evening. So you'd have to have worked that out from the context. And then this one, doué. What does that one mean? What's the best translation of doué? Well, yeah, I mean they've actually put in he's an artiste de génie, and they've told you what that means in English, genius. So I have to say that probably makes it a little bit more straightforward. But there might be other things in there that you might have been distracted by. So, but that really is the word, I think, to be gifted. Where does it say? He's really gifted. That's having given all of those things, he is gifted.